VLR.
Welcome. It's time once again for Truth Serum, where the Doctor of Truth is always in. I'm your host, Gerald Harrison, giving you an injection of truth in the sea of political correctness. With me today is my special guest host, Valerie Santiago. Say hi to everyone, Valerie.
I guess that would make me the nurse, yay?
Yeah. And
well, nurses are important.
You would know.
And the wizard behind the keyboards and all the production equipment, Taylor Millard. Say hi, everyone, Taylor.
Hi, everyone.
Well, what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about immigration. You know how it says on the Statue of Liberty, it says, "Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to be free." Well, it's kind of interesting that if you came from, say, the Western Hemisphere, Europe and that sort of thing, you would basically go through Ellis Island. If you came from the Eastern Hemisphere through the Pac Rim or whatnot, you would normally go through Angel Island in San Francisco. But what you would never do is you try to go ahead and cross the Rio Grande to try to get into the United States of America. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. We, ladies and gentlemen, have an administration in collusion with an inept Congress to allow thousands upon thousands of people who have not legally immigrated to this country, who has been given quasi-amnesty, so to speak. And then upon giving them the, quote, okay to cross the border, we're now finding out that not only are these people undesirable, to put it mildly, these are people that are severely diseased, but worse than that, these are people that have in their own host countries committed atrocious amounts of gang violence, and some of them are gang members such as MS-13. And they've made their way across the Rio Grande into Texas, and they've overwhelmed the system there, typical Cloward and Piven strategy, to the point where they're now going out here and they're sending them to Arizona. Now, what I find kind of interesting is that you never hear nothing about them going through New Mexico. Maybe that's Democrat. I don't know. But I also find that kind of interesting that these people are making their way points north. There was even, matter of fact, even in Houston, Texas, where a very typical staunch Obama supporter, and you would know this because she's black, yeah, I'm racist, whatever. Said that, hey, wait a minute. Why are you giving them this school to live in that you have closed down and you're giving them shelter and food and money to live on, and you're not even helping the people that are here that voted you in twice. It just seems to me that after 5 years of heinous ignorance or just trampling of the United States Constitution, it seems to me that Black America has finally woken up. Now, it seems like the only reason why they've woken up is not because they become politically astute, but they found out that there's some new welfare recipients on the block. And now that they're crowding into their money, which all of a sudden now becomes a problem. But once again, we're not here to talk about what they're thinking. We're here to talk about the illegal immigration problem. Now, Valerie, you're in Texas. You're in San Antonio, correct?
South Texas, yeah, South Texas.
Okay. So you're a whole lot closer to them than say me in California.
Yeah.
What exactly have you seen or heard of in your neck of the woods?
They've brought hundreds and hundreds of these kids up to San Antonio. They are housing them in some, I guess, previously uninhabited dormitories, extra dormitories at the Air Force Base here. And I actually heard they've opened some college dormitories that weren't being used to put some people in there, which leads me to wonder what the incoming students for the fall are going to be coming into in the dormitories. You know, surely they'll have to move the immigrant kids out when it's time for the students to come in to go to school, but it makes me wonder with the lice and the scabies and the TB and the strep that we're hearing about, what these college students are coming into. I've heard stories about, at one point at Lackland Air Force Base, they were talking about possibly an epidemic of strep making its way across the whole base, getting out of the immigrant camp, as they call it camp, and just hitting all of our military personnel. And so, you know, and I'm hearing stories about scabies and lice, and there's a Border Patrol agent that's come down with TB. TB is already an issue in the United States because in the last probably 10 years there's a resurgence of TB because we've got resistant strains that have learned to resist
Mutate.
the antibiotics. Huh?
Mutate?
Yeah, they've learned to resist the antibiotics that are commonly used, and so it's a stronger strain that it's harder to treat. And so, you know, that's enough of an issue without a lot of uncontrolled population being infused into the country, and not knowing how many of them carry that. And it's airborne, so you've got all these kids in close proximity. So, you know, you have some people that have it, they give it to other people, then they basically put these people on buses and planes and send them out to other states, and who knows what they're taking along with them into other communities.
Now, I like the way you put it. You called them uncontrolled population.
It's not controlled. It's very uncontrolled. They're just throwing plane loads of kids and sending them off to. And as far as you said you don't hear anything about New Mexico. I think they're sending a lot of these straight to Arizona. My take on that is that maybe this is kind of a jab, an elbow jab in the ribs of Jan Brewer because of her stance on immigration. Maybe they're saying, well, you know, you've been trying to rail up and fight back against the immigration issues, so we're going to dump a bunch of them on you just to get back at you. I don't know. That's
some have gone.
theory.
Some have gone to New Mexico, but not as much as to say Arizona.
Yeah,
well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You hear about the Arizona influx because it's so huge, and I think it's been that huge because I think somebody's kind of taken a poke at Jan Brewer because.
Oh, I don't think they're taking a poke. I think they're punching her in the throat.
Yeah.
This is not insinuating. This is just full bore. I'm putting it in your face because I can.
Yeah, no, I think they're sending a clear message.
Oh, yes.
This is what you get when you fight up against us.
Oh, yes. And remember, this is supposed to be the person who's in charge of border security. Harry Truman said it best, the buck stops here. The Oval Office hasn't changed, just the occupant. Let that
which is why you have Governor Perry saying, basically, well, I heard Greg Abbott say the other night that the federal government has essentially turned its back on the state of Texas, and so he said we're going to take it into our own hands, and this is why you have the governor of a state sending National Guard down to the border because the feds won't do it.
Yes.
And honestly, I really think it should be a state issue. But if the feds are going to own this, they need to fully own it and send the National Guard. But I have a feeling if the feds were allowed to be the ones to send the National Guard, they would be instructed just to observe and not do anything. So they would be pretty much ineffectual,
Well, technically, excuse me, it is it's a national issue. It's a national issue because the borders are connected.
It's a national security issue. Yeah.
Yeah. So the borders are connected with other states. It is a national security issue. So yes, the federal government needs to be involved. However, even if the federal government went out here and said we'll send the National Guard to the border, but we want them to do nothing.
Yeah.
In essence, these people are the enemy of we the people.
Exactly, which is why I'm saying I'd rather see Governor Perry do something at this point than the feds, because at least he'll do it right.
Oh, I totally agree with that. But what I'm saying is that if these people are the enemy of we the people, and you give aid and comfort to the enemy, there's a word in the English language for that. That word is treason.
Yes.
And not only that Barack Obama, the occupant of the occupant of the Oval Office, would be guilty of that, the entire United States Congress would be guilty of that also, because they're complicit.
But have you noticed, Gerald, that in order to put a stop to that guilt being laid squarely where it belongs, they throw the guilt at us, okay? It's the children. It's the children. This nebulous the children. It's the children. And they tell us if we don't embrace them and bring them in and do everything they need, that we're not American, that we're not Christian.
Oh yes.
All of a sudden it's our guilt.
Speaking of which, and that goes back to the crazy aunt on the left coast, Nancy Pelosi, who speaks of baby Jesus being a refugee.
That's a concoction of the left.
That is a whiskey tango foxtrot moment if ever I heard of one.
Yeah, I find it interesting how the left wants to completely distance this country from any form of religion or faith until it suits them. And then all of a sudden, if we don't do what they want us to do, we're unchristian.
Well, the funny thing about it is this is coming from the same woman who was banned from having communion based on her stance of abortion.
Yeah.
But she's going to tell me about the children. Really?
And about being Christian.
Yeah, now this is in my backyard, ladies and gentlemen. This is my backyard. So you have a minority leader who is completely out of touch with reality. And I'll just leave it as nice as I can leave it.
I don't know how somebody as white as her can be the leader of a minority. Sorry, I just had to say.
Well put. But here's the point that I'm making. it's getting very close, ladies and gentlemen. I hate thinking this way, but it's really giving us a whole lot of it's really giving us no option. At the current rate, assuming that the economy will still even hold up, which is another issue, we the people may have to go nuclear. And what
let me ask something. Let me be contrarian for a minute.
Okay.
Which is all right. So you do have you and Perry said it was about 20% of about 20% of the people coming to the border are kids, actual kids. All right. That was one of the reasons why he wants the National Guard there, because he wants to fight drug and human trafficking. Mm-hmm. My question is, when you find the kids, what's wrong with letting private groups, churches, charities, nonprofits take care of them, as long as they're spending their own money?
Because it sends the message back to their countries that, hey, there's plenty to go around. There's plenty to go around. Send more.
But wait. But if they're taking care of the kids, and we're not spending federal money, we're not spending state money, it's private donations, and then eventually what happens is they either get sent back to their own countries and reunited with their parents, or they get put in the foster system. I guess my question is, what's wrong with that?
Okay. If they're being sent home, then temporary care, I think that would be quite humane and Christian and American. Okay, but the problem is they're not being sent home. So if they end up in the foster system, well, look at the foster system for a minute. It's already pretty messed up.
Well, yeah.
So we want to add thousands on top of that.
This is what I'm saying.
Completely break the foster system.
That's the point. It's not the fact that it's inhumane. It's not the fact that it's Christian. It's the fact that A, you're sending the wrong message to their home countries. Absolutely. To bring more people over here. But B, the moment you bring them into a foster system or any type of caretaking system that is publicly funded, you now tell them that they are going to be in the system, and once you're in that system, it is hard as hell to get out, and that's just for American children.
That's a very good point.
Can you imagine how difficult it would be as a foreign national whose legal status is questionable at best, and then throw a communicable disease on top of that? I wouldn't want that kind of stuff in my country.
It's a recipe for disaster. It definitely is.
It's a huge recipe for disaster. And people need to go back and say, they need to step back and look at this thing 30,000 feet up and say, wait a minute. You can't just go out here and just put the little, the Save the Children face on a camera and say, we need to help the children. No, you need to understand that these people are, let me just go ahead and just put it the way it should be. These people, as it stands, are a walking biohazard. And they need to be quarantined as such. We'll deal with the immigration status later. But right at this second, at this section, they need to be quarantined. Bam! You're not going anywhere. You're staying right there. Tent cities for everybody. You're not moving. Period. Until we figure out what is going on with you. And
this is Gerald. This is to say nothing of the mental illness that is also coming.
Absolutely.
Because I heard a story of a social worker who quit her job after she assessed a child that was suicidal and recommended that he be hospitalized because he was at risk of suicide. And when they refused to hospitalize the child, she said, I don't want to lose my license if this kid kills himself. And she quit the job. She filed a report to make sure somebody knew that she reported he was suicidal. And then she quit her job. And so that brings to mind, if we've got a lot of mental illness coming into society, we've got a lot of mental illness out there to deal with already that's
Exactly.
being underdealt with.
Yes.
And so if we're introducing a lot more of that,
citizens.
Yeah, there's just another system to be broken by an overload of people with need.
And this is why I'm saying that, as inhumane as it sounds on the surface, we need to quarantine these people because they're a walking biohazard. That's number one. Number two, from a political point of view, we are really at the cusp, if not about ready to step over and use the nuclear option. And to those who do not understand what I mean by nuclear option, it talks about in the Declaration of Independence that when the government begins to hamper your ability to pursue life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it is the responsibility and duty of the people, the citizenry, to alter or abolish the government and set up another one. We are really close to getting to that point. I don't want to go there, quite honestly. But
Gerald, do me a favor and repeat that last part about the responsibility and the duty. Let that sink in with people.
We are as American citizens, we are responsible, according to the Declaration of Independence, that when the government begins to hamper our ability to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, that it is the right and the duty of the citizenry, we the people, to alter or abolish the government and set up a new one.
This is not just a right, it's a responsibility.
Absolutely.
Freedom and liberty do not maintain themselves. We are supposed to be on a vigilance 24/7, and we haven't been doing it.
Speaking of which, Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
Exactly.
It is eternal vigilance. We need to have an understanding that it is not just a, America's just not this wild concept that people just thought of and just said, hey, let's go do something. We have a responsibility. Now, and here's the funny part. And as a matter of fact, I pulled up the Declaration of Independence. And, those of us who are...
But you don't have a copy lying around right at your hand like I have 11?
I'm sorry?
You don't have a copy of it just lying out in front of you? Like I have a copy right on top of a stack of comic books?
No, as a matter of fact, it's in the other room, and I had to go ahead and pull it up since I'm on the show.
Okay.
Just saying. But for those of us who are, say, over 35, we remember a little Saturday morning cartoon called Schoolhouse Rock.
Oh yeah.
Where they talked about the Declaration of Independence, and we know this part about it that says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator, with the capital C, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's where Schoolhouse Rock stops. It goes on to say that to secure these rights, government are instituted by men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that when any form of government becomes destructive until this ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall see most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Does scabies going across the Rio Grande affect your safety and happiness? Yes, I think it does. And if the federal government is not going out here and allowing you to pursue it, according to this founding document, you as an American citizen have the right to alter or abolish the government.
Now, to be clear, that doesn't necessarily mean inventing a whole new form of government.
No, it
doesn't. It could simply mean restoring what was originally intended.
That's exactly what it means. Now, that's why it says alter or to abolish.
Uh-huh.
So you can either repair what's broken, or if it's so far broken, you got to throw it all away and start all over. It gives you the right to do that. Here's the funny thing. Most people talk about what is unconstitutional and yet don't understand that the Constitution is founded on the Declaration of Independence. So if they want to really find out where their rights come from, where does the First Amendment, First Amendment, Second Amendment at all come from? They have to start the Declaration. Because it wasn't just a declaration from Britain, it was a declaration to ourselves. We are declaring our independence from Britain, yes, but we are also declaring our independence, our allegiance to God. Because we made it clear that all men are created equal that are endowed by the Creator, and when you look that up, they're not talking about the one in the Quran. Just so everybody is clear on that. I mean, I find it kind of interesting that the current occupier in the White House says it's a wonderful thing to hear the Muslim call the prayer, but can call yourself a Christian at the same time. Let me move on. The bottom line here, ladies and gentlemen, is that we have what we have because we are so into partisan and party politics and forget the big picture that we have a right of having our happiness and a duty to preserve it for our children's children. And we as Americans have gotten away from that because we're so interested in American Idol. We are so interested in Michael Sam. We are so interested in what does MSNBC says versus what does Fox say.
And every kind of housewife.
Or every kind of housewife would name the city, Real Housewife of fill in the blank. We have forgotten that because we are a nation of a rule of law, that we are responsible and duty bound to keep that law. And if those that are entrusted with keeping that law for us have compromised it, it is our responsibility to either A, hold them to account and correct that problem, or B, remove that problem altogether.
But that's hard, Gerald. It takes effort and learning about things and time.
Well, it took all those things about effort and things and time to get us where we are. And after the break, we'll go ahead and talk about how we need to get them back. So we'll be back with another edition of Truth Serum right after this.
This is J.D. Tuchilli from Reason, and you are listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
We want to welcome Michael Moore to Occupy Wall Street. I'm so impressed by what I'm seeing here.
How much of people's income do you, Michael Moore, want the government to confiscate?
Probably twice what we're paying right now.
It's not envy, it's war.
Where's the rage? Where's the uprising?
Storm the doors of the New York Stock Exchange.
It is a class war.
If the wealthy paid their fair share. For a documentary filmmaker, I do really well. I'm very blessed.
And the rich thought poverty was bad.
I do well.
They get rid of it.
What pure? There's nothing pure about capitalism.
And they know what's coming on Wall Street.
We're seeing the end of capitalism. And I say good riddance.
He is one of my favorite capitalists. Yeah, I want to give him a hug.
This is Kevin Jackson of the Black Sphere Radio Show. Listen to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
And we're back for another injection of Truth Serum, where once again the Doctor of Truth is always in. On the last side of the break, we were talking about basically going with the nuclear option of either altering or abolishing the government, something I'm not really fond of doing, but feel that it's going to be necessary. And the reason why I'm saying it's going to be necessary because Barack Obama and the complicit United States Congress is on a collision course to reduce our nation into a third world status, complete with all the violence and lack of freedom that third world nations have. And Valerie, I think you probably would know a little bit more about that than even probably me or Taylor, because you've been to Venezuela.
The Venezuela situation, yeah. They were a wealthy, free country, and in a matter of a few years, 15 years is a relatively short time in the life of a country, to go from being an oil-wealthy, educated nation to being short of toilet paper and soap and cooking oil.
Now, that's kind of interesting that you bring that up. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, these are some of the choices that we're going to have to really make as a nation. If we allow as the governed, we allow Congress to be as complicit as they are, or as they have been, rather, and Barack Obama trying to assert tyrannical power, and the Supreme Court justices basically just trying to, even interpreting their own law to a certain degree. There's a problem. And in that problem, Valerie, I think there's something going on with your mic.
Something going on with my mic?
I'm getting a lot of wind noise or something.
Okay, let me adjust.
Okay,
Here.
but like I was saying, we're at a point, ladies and gentlemen, with a complicit Congress and a tyrannical president and an indifferent Supreme Court, the first thing we have to understand is, where did all this come from? And once again, it comes back to culture. Culture is key to this, and the reason why I say it's key to this is because this is where it started. The ones that in the 60s who were telling people to question authority have now become the authority. And what were these people about during the 60s? It's not just about free love and free sex and all that. That's what they're also talking about. But what they really were anti-God, anti-family, and to a certain degree anti-capitalist. You know, capitalism has become almost like a dirty word. But I would say to you this: there has never been in the history of the world a country that has thrived on service sector jobs alone. Never. So we're at a crossroads, ladies and gentlemen. We have to either try to fix our country in 2014 with the midterm elections, as well as holding our elected officials to account even before those elections take place. Because if we don't do that, then we are going to see, in my estimation, our own type of Cuba, Venezuela, or even China, where the government will be completely in control and we are at their mercy.
Well, and I think that the 2014 and the 2016 elections are big steering points, but I think beyond the political steering points, we really need to look at what you're getting at is not so much culture as who controls the culture.
Yes.
And if we need to change pretty quickly the balance or the lack of balance in who's controlling the current culture.
But in order for us to be able to change or regain control of the current culture, we first have to ask ourselves, who's in control right now? And it's not the problem is we think it's a left-right paradigm, and it isn't. We think it's a conservative liberal paradigm, and it really isn't. It really comes down to liberty versus tyranny, and both of them are settled on are centered on one thing: worldview. And there's only one of two types of worldviews you could have. You either have a biblical worldview or you have a non-biblical worldview. And for those in the audience who don't understand what a biblical worldview is, it is very simple. I can explain it to you in a single sentence. A biblical worldview is your view of the world through the lens of Scripture. That's it. That's all it is. Consequently, a non-biblical worldview is a view of the world through the lens of something other than Scripture. That's all it is. So you're talking about, it's not a war of left and right. It's not a war of Democrat versus Republican. It's a war of worldviews. It's a war of ideas. Because ideas shape the society, and society moves in a direction. So the question you have to ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen, what type of worldview do I want to shape my nation in? Do I want to shape it in a biblical worldview? Or do I want to shape it in a non-biblical worldview?
Now, for anybody who's listening, I think we probably ought to clarify that when we talk about the Bible, we're not necessarily talking about religion. So if you've been to a particular denomination of church and were turned off by it, we're not talking about denominations here. We're talking about God. Just God. Just take it at that.
There is a difference between a biblical worldview and a theocracy.
Yeah.
There is a huge difference. As a matter of fact, anybody that would go and advocate theocracy need to go ahead and recheck their history, because that doesn't work too well either.
When men start to believe that they're really in charge, and they cease to acknowledge that there's a force much bigger than us that's really at the helm. When we start getting all full of ourselves and think we are the answer to everything, we're screwed.
Well, that's more than screwed. It's really pride. And pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. It is something
the road we're on.
It's something that, if you recognized our founders, they try to steer away from that. They didn't like the limelight, if you will. They didn't like that cult of personality. They wanted to do their job for the nation and then move on.
Do you think the founding fathers would have wanted people to start fan pages for them on Facebook?
No. Absolutely not. Because again, they did not believe in a cult of personality. They didn't believe that they believed that public office was a duty, not a right. Now that statement should be echoed into the chambers of Congress.
It absolutely should be, but they didn't have special interests back then.
Yes, they did. Are you kidding me?
Not to the point that they do now. They're not
as sophisticated as they are now. But absolutely, special interest goes back to you can trace it all the way back to human history. There was moving influence. I can sit down and have a talk with this founding father and tell him what I'm concerned about and see if he'll build that into the law. But they weren't sending him on a cruise, and they weren't hooking him up with a vacation home, and that's what I'm saying.
Getting them hookers and all this other stuff they're doing now.
Right. No, but I'm saying they weren't as sophisticated as they are to the special interest in the day of the founding fathers was not as sophisticated as the ones it is now. But they still had special interest nonetheless.
I think my point is that in their time, there wasn't the corrupting influence of special interests. I mean, there were people that tried to sway their influence, but
now but see, that goes back, Valerie. That goes back into what is it that society will accept. If society accepts that bribes and payoffs are normal, that's what you'll have. If society says that having God in the center of your life and that your public life as well as your private life is theirs for him to watch, that's what the society will have. So the reason why the founders were successful is because of their worldview, not because necessarily of their policy decisions. It was their worldview that their policy decisions came out of.
Yeah.
And that's where we as Americans have completely missed the boat. We think that our policy shapes our worldview. No, it's the other way around. Your worldview shapes the policy. And the thing about it is, all you have to do is look at our worldview by who do we elect as a nation to the highest office in the land. Let me even take it a step further. And I can say this just in my own backyard. We have somebody like Nancy Pelosi that's been reelected at least 18 times.
Well, that's just lazy voters. That's all that is.
No, but wait a minute. It's not just lazy voters. It's the fact that this is where the mindset of the people are, because this is where the culture is. And the reason why the culture is that way is because there is no opposing force that would say, no, this isn't right. The same reason why you have the people who elect John Boehner, the same people who would elect Jackie Spear, the same people that will elect Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, the same people that will elect Sheila Jackson Lee, Barbara Lee. The reason why they do that is because of the culture that they live in. The culture that they live in says it's acceptable to go out here and have this stuff done for them. And then when they bring these people to Washington, these people now feel entitled, and they don't look at themselves as them representing the people. They look at themselves as monarchs, and you are the subject that addresses them. It is a complete hypocrisy and complete not mind-numbing, a complete sham.
Indoctrination? Okay.
Sham of what the founders intended it to be. We are a constitutional republic with representatives. We do not have kings and queens with little kingdoms.
But the problem with that is, Gerald, that you've got a bunch of lazy voters out there who never took the time to learn about their own form of government.
The reason why they never took the time to learn, Valerie, is because those that choose to destroy this type of government knew that in order to be able to do that, they have to reach the very young. This is why you see so many people that are left-leaning in our public schools. They knew that if they indoctrinate them at 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, by the time they hit 18, they don't know what a Republican is. They don't know what conservatism is. They don't even have a biblical worldview at that point. Because those people are anti-God, anti-family, pro-government, and they're shoving it down our children's throats 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 180 days a year. And now, in this term, they're not only going to be doing it for that duration of time, you're now going to have the kid with scabies and headlights right next to him. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, regardless of whether you voted for him or not, this person is in here representing you twice. So we have a choice to make, ladies and gentlemen. And the choice to make is very, very stark, and it's very, very real. It's either we go out here and we clean up the mess in our local, state, and federal governments and start to hold these people to account and say, no more, you will now go out here and do what our state and our federal constitution says you need to do, or you need to find another job. Brush up your resume. You don't work here anymore. Or we're going to be looking a whole lot like Cuba, Venezuela, and China. And in that, I would say to you this: if we as a nation decide to opt for the latter, I would leave you with this. The 3 things as Americans you would need to do if you decide to opt for the latter is the first thing is you need to pray up. If you don't know God, you need to get to know him. And if you do know God, you need to repent to him. Because even our founders recognized that their rights come from him, the creator.
And they were of all different faiths. They weren't all of the same church or the same denomination.
No, they didn't come from the same. No, they didn't.
They were able to agree on that, even though they came from differing points of view on it.
Absolutely, they all recognize that there is a creator God, and that all of their rights come from them. Now they will see. Now whatever flavor they have, they will live up to that flavor as they see fit. But they understood that not one flavor overrides another. The second thing you need to do is you need to stock up. Now, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, we all know them as FEMA, has made it clear that every American home should have 72 hours or 3 days worth of food, water, and medical supplies, as well as other personal items.
I can tell you, as one who's been without power and other services for 9 days in post-hurricane conditions, that FEMA will not do it all for you.
And I would say to you this. Anything that FEMA says, or anything that the government says about what you should have, multiply it by 10, and that's what you really should have at a minimum. So in other words, you should have at least 30 days, not 3. At least 30 days. And the last thing you need to do, and it kind of pains me to say this, but you need to do it, is you need to arm up. Because I can tell you this. We as a nation are $17 trillion in debt online. That's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. When you get into IRAs, 401ks, and pensions and that sort of thing, we are $65 trillion in debt. Add the numbers up, that's $82 trillion. That's simple math. Now, what is the GDP of the United States of America? It's about $15 trillion. So we're over 5 times our GDP when you add up all the stuff that we owe. We're broke. So I'm saying this to you. I'm saying this to you as a concerned citizen, as a fellow countryman. You need to get ready, ladies and gentlemen. If we can't fix this politically, it's going to get fixed the other way. Because when the markets crash, and I don't know if it's going to be a slow burn, or I don't know if it's going to drop like a hot rock. But when they crash, because we can't sustain this kind of debt load, there are going to be riots in the grocery store, riots at the gas station, and riots at ATMs. I know it's a very sombering and sober point to leave on. But I would say to you now, start now. If you haven't got your house in order, start now. Because if we're not willing to go out here and step it up politically in 2014 and 2016, if we make it that long, then we're going to face it culturally. This is not a game, and this is not a joke, ladies and gentlemen. We are truly on the cusp of plunging into third world nation status.
Unfortunately, what we're dealing with is the majority of the populace, even people who see how bad things are, when I talk to them about what's happening in Cuba and what's happening in Venezuela, even Cubans and Venezuelans who have come here from it will say to me, "Oh, not in this country." No, you can't have that. You have democracy here. It won't happen here. They don't see it.
No, they don't. They don't. And it's not just them. A lot of Americans, they don't have a clue.
No, that's what I'm talking about. The majority of people in this country, even who see it, they still don't acknowledge that we could get that bad. And I believe we can. You can look at YouTube videos right now of women in Venezuela fighting, physically fighting, over what little milk makes it to a store because they want milk for their kids.
Yeah.
And they're scratching and clawing over this.
Yeah. And if they don't believe it, all they have to do is go on YouTube and look at what happened when the EBT system went down for 3 hours across 17 states. Food riots on levels that you never thought would be imaginable happened. This is 3 hours in 17 states. One person in Louisiana was reported that they put $700 worth of groceries in their cart, knowing they only have 49 cents on their EBT card. They knew that. Now you're talking about, and when the power came back on, the system came back online, everybody dropped their carts and walked away. Now imagine what would happen if that went on in all 50 states. And it went longer than 3 hours. This went 3 days.
And not just with EBT cards, but every bank account everybody has.
Exactly.
That goes offline.
Exactly. I was just getting to that. So how are you going to pay for your groceries? How are you going to pay for gas? How are you going to pay for anything? And all of a sudden, the Second Amendment seems a whole lot more appealing. I'm not wishing that on anybody. And I will tell you the truth, I'm not. I would pray that we as a nation would actually see what we need to see and then do what we need to do accordingly, which means we hold governments to account at all levels. Ladies and gentlemen, this is True Serum. Here to give you an injection of truth in a sea of political correctness. I hope you take my words to heart. I pray that we don't have to go down this road. But I would be remiss if I did not prepare you for what we're about to embrace. I hope we're able to go ahead and solve our differences in what we have to politically. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the alternative is something I don't think we as Americans can bear. Any final thoughts, Valerie?
Somebody get me a doctor. I feel pretty weak.
Yep, I would say that.
I want a nap, but no one should be surprised by that.
You must have been a cat in a former life.
But that's all we have today for True Serum. For Valerie Santiago, Taylor Millard.
You too. I gotta go work out.
For Valerie Santiago, Taylor Millard, I'm Gerald Harrison, saying that I'm here to give you a shot of truth in a sea of political correctness. And tune us again next time for True Serum, where the doctor of truth is always in.
Feeling high. Come on, loaded, baby.
This show is copyright by VLR Media. All opinions of panelists and guests are their own and may not reflect the opinion of VLR Media, the host, or anyone else.